Good morning, Bob. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, good morning, Chris. And I hope this is the last time that we'll have one of these distance discussions, and that next time we'll be face-to-face across a table, followed by a nice lunch somewhere.
Yeah, I look forward to that, very much so. One of the things we want to talk, I know you want to talk about, is this concept of a license to operate.
Yeah, I'm mindful, Chris, that there are two, what I term big issues crossing my mind, is that as we come out of lockdown, there's going to be a major change to the landscaping in terms of the people operating in our sector. I think we are going to ultimately have thousands upon thousands of new operators, new people coming to the sector to replace those businesses that have had to close down. And that is no bad thing. I'm not criticizing that. And the second area that I want to sort of really bring attention to is that when we look at the regulatory framework for our sector, most of it tends to focus around facilities, whether it's Visit England, Visit Britain inspection in hotels, or whether it's looking at food premises by local authorities, whole range of regulatory processes we have currently, but they all tend to focus on facilities rather than the skills of the people who are going to be operating those facilities.
That's a fair point. I suppose it's because it's more measurable. It's easier to measure.
Well, it is, and I suppose it's a simple ticking box process. But when I was sort of in my previous job at BHA and now UK Hospitality as is, I was always impressed by the work that the British Institute of Innkeeping did with their sort of license to operate, where it encouraged all license holders in the pub trade to obtain this license, and that was then a key part of being able to get a license for your premises, having this BII certificate. And I thought that was a great move forward. And, you know, I'm mindful that we've got a professional body, the Institute of Hospitality. I would like to think that we should be working with the Institute of Hospitality and get the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts and Springboard and UK Hospitality all working together to see if we can't come up with some form of certificate to help show that people being responsible for food service premises and accommodation in our sector have a certificate of operation which justifies them having that responsibility.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? And do you think?
Well, I think it's about equivalence as well. I'm not saying everyone would have to have this certificate, but working with the various bodies and working with colleges and whatever, you know, one may already have an equivalent certificate, shall we say. So it's not about everyone having to get this new certificate, but having a standard of professionalism, so that if you are running a food service operation, selling food and accommodation, and you are responsible, we can be sure that you actually have some qualifications to do it, because you're in a very particular position, and if you aren't doing the job properly, you run the risk of causing sort of great harm to customers. And I really think it's time that we actually looked at this in terms of trying to professionalize our sector, with the obvious benefits that will come out of doing just such a thing.
But it reminds me, it goes on to the tipping piece, because obviously there's a campaign to try and get people buying into a tipping certificate as well, best practice. The whole sector is trying to professionalise itself now, isn't it?
Well, that's the point, and a more professional sector will be viewed as being more professional. It will encourage better quality people to enter the sector. Hopefully it'll encourage more people to stay in the sector. And we only have to look over to America to see that, you do actually have to have a license to operate in hospitality in many states in America. So, it's not as if we're suggesting something that has never been done. I'm just saying maybe now is the time to consider bringing something like this in. So we actually focus on the skills of people operating in our sector, not just facilities, and particularly for new entrants. At the moment, really, quite frankly, anyone can suddenly decide they want to open up a hotel or a restaurant, in this country, providing the facilities meet the regulatory requirements.
And I suppose your view is that we're going to get loads of new entries because of obviously what's happened in the last year.
Yes, and I think that, I think the reality is we will have a lot of new entrants, and I say in many ways I encourage that because, they will bring with them innovation, new ideas, which actually is always good for the sector to have this new influx of ideas. I just want to ensure that from a customer point of view, I think I mentioned in our last discussion how important it is that we build trust with customers, and this is another, as it were, tool in the box to be building trust with the customers and society at large that we are a professional sector. Hospitality has a key role to play, and it will end up being a better sector in the future than perhaps it was in the past.
And hence, do you see an alliance between the IOH, Springboard, and Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, etc.?
Well, I think they should all be working together to all add input as to sort of how they can come up with this or explore this idea, because I've always taken the clear view that there is a role for all these various bodies. UK Hospitality essentially represents the corporate entity, the company. The Royal Academy of Culinary Arts very much is representing craft people, and that the Institute of Hospitality is the professional body that represents the individual. And I always thought it was a great mistake a few years ago when the Institute lost its awarding body status, and that was passed to People First and other bodies. And quite frankly, a professional body, we should have a strong professional body be responsible for awarding status to people who we deem to be professionals within our sector. And I would hope that now we have a new chief executive of the Institute, that they actually look at how they can regain awarding status for giving out professional certificates to everyone qualified to join the sector.
I think it's a really interesting idea. From the customer point of view, how do you think the customers are viewing the sector nowadays?
I think in the short term, the customer will be just so relieved to want to get back to eating in a restaurant, drinking in a pub, staying in a hotel, that is all that will be on their mind. But then once the dust has settled and that initial euphoria has passed, I think customers will be perhaps even more demanding than ever, and comparing those with great practice and good practice and those who are not having such good practice, particularly on, the cleanliness side, the hygiene side, good practice side, because whilst the vaccine program has gone extremely well and the numbers are coming down, I think no one imagines that the threat of coronavirus or future pandemics has gone away, so that if we are going to enjoy these greater freedoms, particularly in the hospitality sector, we are going to be judged about how professional we are in keeping up the standards of operation. And that is why I think it's so important that we want to be seen as a professional industry that takes our responsibilities extremely seriously, so that customers can enjoy food, drink, and accommodation in safety.
Well, I suppose that's why I asked the question, because you've always been a great communicator. Does the industry need a stronger communications message at times?
Well, yes, I think it does, but I think it's got to be a collective message. I think the individual bodies do well to their own audiences, but I think the industry at large doesn't do very well about putting out a collective message. I was always fascinated in the past that industries such as the banking industry, the car industry, even construction industry, property industry, when they have key messages to put across to consumers in the wider community, they collectively come together to give that collective message. I never seem to see the hospitality industry coming together to give out what I term collective messages to the benefit of everyone in the sector. So that is why I really would implore all the specialist bodies that we do need in the sector to come together for collective communications.
Now, at the heart of licensed operate is all really about training and skills development, isn't it?
It is indeed, and I think we should never forget that. As I say, it doesn't matter how much money that is spent on wonderful facilities in a hotel or a new restaurant or a pub or whatever. One can spend millions, but it's actually the people that work those facilities that actually make the experience work for customers, and particularly make it a memorable experience. And as I say, I think I've mentioned in the past, I'm always staggered about when I hear £5 million has been spent on refurbishing a new restaurant in central London, or £100 million has been spent on one of our five-star hotels in London. And then I look at what the training budget is for those particular establishments on giving the staff the skills to make sure that capital works for them. And quite often, the amount of money that's spent on training the staff is minuscule compared to the capital investment, and that's got to be wrong. We've got to get the balance back again between capital investment to get the right facilities and investment in people to make sure those facilities work both for the business and for the customer. And that is why I've set this target that I think 1% of payroll costs being reinvested in people is about the right level that we should be operating on to ensure that we continue to spend money on our staff.
Now, last week, as people were reopening, of course, the big debate was there weren't enough staff to recruit back, which is obviously something you've been talking about.
I'm hearing that, but it is not surprising if, from the numbers I see, possibly 600,000 or 700,000 staff were lost at, sort of during lockdown, for want of a better word. Many of those may have gone back to Europe, and of course they're not available in the immediate term. But again, one looks at the registered unemployment figures, and there are, let's just say, several 100,000 now on the registered unemployed figures that weren't there before. So we have to look at new entrants to the industry to take up those vacancies. So that is why it is so important to, one, make our sector attractive to people to want to work in it. Two, when they choose to try our sector, give them the skills to do the job properly. And three, reward them properly when we do employ them. And as I say, I think for all these new employees and new starters to the sector, I think there's got to be almost a compulsory 100 hours minimum induction training for these new starters, never mind ongoing training once they've got through that induction training, because we do need these people, but we've got to make it attractive for them to want to join our sector, but above all, stay in our sector.
Well, it makes me also wonder whether we've underrated Brexit or we've just tried to put it to one side a bit. Question.
Oh, I think several things came together so that rather than having to face up to the consequences of Brexit, COVID took over, so we sort of didn't have to think about the consequences of Brexit. We now do have to think of the consequences of Brexit, and, for the immediate future, whether it's for COVID-related issues or post-Brexit related issues, we are not going to have the potential workforce that we had before from Europe. We will, perforce, have to recruit locally from a UK workforce, and I suspect particularly local to where your business is operating. So that is why it is so important to be attractive to new entrants and school leavers and people from moving from other sectors, particularly retail, because I think perhaps retail is the area where there are going to be the greatest shakeout of employees, because people now shopping online. We're going to see a movement from people working in high street locations, in shops. Those are the very people we now have to make it attractive to come and work in hospitality. And I think we should be perhaps work with the retail sector on conversion trading, as I call it, so that people who were registered for large retail chains, and we can work with their trade association to have their details of those people, to be offering them jobs to work in the hospitality sector.
Now, one does sense there has been a real shift, psychological shift over the last year, that people really do want to collaborate better than they did before.
Oh, I do, and I think that is what we should be working on now, is that willingness, I think, to collaborate. And I think one has to sort of strike while the iron is hot, that while there is this willingness to collaborate, let's get the collaboration going, because I think if we leave it 3 to 6 months, it will wane away and we will have lost the opportunity. So that's why I'm really anxious that we actually try and forge those stronger relationships now and get some positive benefits from that, so that people can actually see the benefit of working closer together without giving up their individual specialist identities.
I mean, that's going to be the interesting piece, because I think a lot of people are concerned that 6 months' time we will be back to normal again.
Well, but that is why we almost come back to what your favourite theme is, Chris, which is about leadership. This is now calling for proper leadership and leadership of the sector, and for the key leaders that we have, both of the trade associations, the speciality associations, and people from industry, to come together and show some leadership of the sector and for the sector, and not just think about their own business in a fairly sort of self-centered way. They've got to think bigger and wider, and that's the sort of leadership we want at the moment.
But I get the sense that's happening, which is actually encouraging.
Well, I see lots of signs of it. So let's keep, as I say, let's keep at it, keep a focus on it, and let's see the benefits emerge from that over the next 6 months, because I think it is the next 6 months that will be absolutely critical to change the face of our sector for the good, so that we can all say, out of COVID-19 and the last 18 months, some real positive has come for the hospitality sector.
Yeah, which then ties back to the license to operate, doesn't it? Because that sets a benchmark.
Exactly right. And whilst it might not be a perfect way, I think just by having that discussion, it will actually focus minds on the importance of the people who are running hotels, restaurants, etc., that they have the requisite skills to do the job. And it is the skills of people that matter most of all, not just about throwing capital at the facilities.
So do all the kind of old guidebooks and guide processes need to change as well a bit? Well,
there has been people were trying to change the emphasis, and I know, sort of the Visit England, Visit Britain scheme, a number of the schemes, whilst they used to almost be entirely just ticking boxes about facilities, they have tried to focus a little bit more about procedures and skills of people. The same with food inspections by local authorities on safety of food premises. Whilst a lot of it is still ticking boxes about the fridges, the freezers, the cleanliness, all the various facilities, they are trying to incorporate procedures and how well the procedures of cleaning are carried out by people. So it is about trying to change the emphasis onto the practices of the people, not just ticking boxes on facilities.
And actually, look, business is something that's getting more complex the whole time. So actually some training in how to run a business is probably quite a good thing.
Exactly. I mean, these aren't easy changes. They're evolutionary changes, and it's a change of mindset. But if we can focus on this change of mindset and put it to the fore, just get people focusing on, it's the people that matter. It's the procedures that matter. It's how people are led and managed, how they operate. They're the things that really make the difference. And while we can get people focused on that, I think we will see the benefits on a go-forward basis.
So what do you see as the barriers to this happening? Because the argument is logical. So what do you think the barriers are to stop it?
The barriers are always self-interest and, it'll all go away and we'll soon get back to the way things were, and maybe it's too difficult to do something different. I'm just looking after my own business, etc., etc. Change always requires a big effort, a change of mindset, but I'm hoping that, the new leaders emerge, the current leadership do actually see the bigger, wider picture of what the benefits are. And as in everything, Chris, change is challenging, and change can appear slightly threatening at times, but we've got to be up for the challenge to get the benefits. And I think those of us who've been in the industry a long time, we've seen many of these challenges before, but maybe we haven't had the courage to face up to them, or maybe we've taken our eye off the ball. But it doesn't mean that it now isn't the right time, because of what has happened over the last 18 months, to take this opportunity, because we have had this period of closure, to actually try and say we are going to make a new start and we are going to do things differently into the future.
It's really interesting, I have to say, because having meetings now, starting meetings again, I do find it's almost like old war stories. People look back to March last year and say, actually, they just didn't know how they're going to cope. But somehow we have survived and we have come through.
But that is because, the human psyche is remarkably adaptive, and it does find ways of getting through severe challenges, whether it's COVID, whether it's 3-day weeks, whether it's wartime. One goes back in history. The human being, the human mind find ways to adapt. We have adapted. We've come up with lots of new ideas. What I'm saying is, now we have the opportunity of putting those new ideas and those new thoughts into some form of coherent practice for the future, to really make a difference, to make this industry one that we really are proud of, does attract people to want to have a career in it, and is deemed to be a well-employed sector as well. So, those are the challenges we have. It's got to be an attractive sector for people to want to work in, and people want to stay in, to be able to build a career in it, and to feel that they're being properly rewarded for the work that they do.
And the IOH is the logical one to lead this, because it is the professional body.
Well, exactly right. And I really want IH to really, what I term, get its mojo back, because it does represent the individual. And it's as important that we have a strong body representing the individual as we have in UK hospitality representing the corporate entity. We need both, and they're complementary to each other, and they should be working closely together, but representing their particular interests.
And this period of time gives them a golden opportunity to achieve that, I guess.
Indeed, and I hope that, as I say, the new leadership of IH will reach out to UK hospitality and vice versa, so they can see how they can work together collectively for the benefit of everyone. Okay,
Bob, look, thank you so much as always for your time today. I think that's
really enjoyable, Chris, and let's hope in a year's time we can look back and see that yes, we really did make a difference, and that some real benefits came out of the challenges of the last 18 months.
Actually, I'm really positive. I think you're seeing some great people have really learned a lot. I think all of us have learned a lot over the last year.
Well, sometimes, running a business is very time-consuming, and, often you spend 15 hours a day, 18 hours a day, particularly if it's your own business, and you're so consumed with running your own business, you don't really have time to sometimes think about other issues. And I think what the last year, 18 months has done has given a lot of people a little bit of time to reflect, not just on their own business, but where their business fits in the hospitality sector as a whole, and where hospitality fits in with society as a whole. And I think it's using that little bit of time to think has been what has made the difference.
I think that's very sound, very true. Bob, many thanks to you today.
Good to speak to you, Chris, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.